Okay. Great. So yes, hi everyone. My idea for today is to pick up where we left off on Monday. And on Monday we looked at the generic requirements that the sources of IceCube neutrinos have to fulfill. And we started going through basically these sources that we identified as comfortably, theoretically at least, they can comfortably accelerate cosmic rays to high enough energies that they could be producing the IceCube neutrinos. And we started looking at one of them, jetted AGN, and specifically what happens when we're looking directly into the jet where we have a blazar. So today I'm going to continue for quite some time with the blazar example. But I want you to understand that it's just an example and that similar conditions exist, for example, in a GRB when it comes to neutrino production. And so I'll illustrate the key points with the blazars, and then we'll go through all those other source classes and see what requirements they each fulfill, what problems they have, and what we know about the origin of IceCube neutrinos. All right, so you tried to fit such a spectral energy distribution on Monday, and so you remember that this one here is all the synchrotron emission from this blazar, and here on Monday we thought that this is probably inverse Compton emission from those same electrons. And it goes all the way up to TeV energies in some blazars. So very high energy gamma rays. And this was also our motivation why blazars were chosen for this, because they absolutely dominate the extra-galactic gamma ray sky. So they are the overwhelming majority of TeV and GV gamma ray sources that we know from outside our own galaxy. This means for sure they accelerate particles to very high energies. And the question that we're going to work through today is, do they only accelerate electrons, or do they also accelerate protons? Because gamma rays might be just produced by electrons, but then we don't get neutrinos. So yeah, as I was saying before, previously we worked with this model in which all the gamma rays come from electrons, upscattering these photons or other photons close to the black hole. But it could well be this shape of gamma rays that we see could well be produced by neutral pions decaying to gamma rays, and or it could be proton synchrotron emission producing these gamma rays. So there are several possibilities for this origin of this gamma ray emission, and in this case in particular, but also in the proton synchrotron case, we will get neutrinos in addition from this blazar. And it's reasonable that some high energy protons are there in this jet. The question is really how many and what energies they reach and so on. This is what matters for neutrino production. So a sort of schematic of what's happening in this source. So we have in the blazar jet, we have many options where we can have a shock, where we can accelerate protons. Maybe there is a long-lived standing shock, or maybe there are many shocks being formed as matter plasma goes at these relativistic speeds down the jet. And so these protons are somewhere relativistically traveling down the jet, and they have photopion interactions with photons, either from the jet itself. We've seen these jets, right? They're very bright. So either photons in the jet, or there are photons associated with the black hole, with the supermassive black hole. And in these interactions, we get, the branching ratio for neutral or charged pions is the same, roughly. That means we get, for every 3 neutrinos, we get 2 gamma rays. the gamma rays have each half the energy of the pion. The neutrinos have each a quarter of the energy of the charged pion. Therefore, each neutrino has half the energy of each gamma ray. And so here I've written the relation of, okay, we have 3 neutrinos for every 2 gamma rays. So these are these factors here. And except for this, which is roughly 1, the energy flux of neutrinos equals the energy flux of gamma rays in photopion interactions. So this is a useful thing to remember, that every time you see a gamma ray flux in any kind of source, that gives you an upper limit to the neutrino flux in that source. And why do I say upper limit? Because gamma rays can come from other leptonic processes, so electron emission. But neutrinos have to be associated with gamma ray production because of this branching ratio. So if we were to go back to this source, we could say that the neutrino flux can be at most this much. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Because these are the gamma rays here, and we just said that they should have the same normalization at most. So just to remind you that when we looked at these jetted AGN, I mentioned that there are 2 classifications. Actually, now there is a 3rd one for even weaker jets. That doesn't matter so much. But these very powerful jets are associated with very efficient accretion close to the Eddington limit. And we said that the unification model describes all AGN based on few parameters. That is, when we look at a very powerful blazar, we don't see the jets, but we know it is of this type, if this unification model is perfectly correct, of this very collimated, powerful, do you have a question? Okay, powerful jet. And so in this case of that powerful type collimated, what we call FR2 radio galaxies, we have a lot of photons related to the accretion disk. We have dust, and this is the emission lines that we saw on Wednesday. These broad emission lines, they reveal the presence of hot ionized gas surrounding the black hole. And in addition, there was this dust torus that we saw in one photo that also intercepts and irradiates the light from the disk to infrared. So these are great because for neutrino production, we need a target medium, and these are our target medium. Now, if we have these other lazier jets, then we don't have all these photon fields. We just have the photons inside the jet. So naively, I would say, you can guess we won't have that much neutrino production here, just because of the absence of target material. Okay. Now, how does neutrino production look like? So in any astrophysical shock, the simplest we can assume is that we get a power law of protons with an e⁻² spectrum in terms of the number. That means in terms of the energy flux of the protons, we have this kind of what looks like a straight line, because I've multiplied here by e². And so when we have such an e⁻² power law of protons, what matters for neutrino production is what kind of photon field these protons are interacting with. Okay, now this is basically this blazar or a similar one. This is energy flux here. Sorry that I have this, this is astronomy. I should have changed. Anyway, this is also e² dE. So energy flux, the number flux is what we saw in the other plot here. So there are way more low energy photons than there are high energy photons. And this determines the shape of the neutrino spectrum, because only the high energy protons have access to these very numerous low energy protons. Okay, so otherwise they just don't, they're not yet at the threshold for pion production. And also the photopion cross-section is resonant, so it's not flat like in proton-proton interactions. So as a result, even though we started off with a proton power law, which is flat in energy flux, we always get this very peaky spectrum from photopion interactions. So this is true not only for blazars, this is true for photopion interactions in general. And so all the models that you're ever going to see for blazars have this shape, and you can maybe already remark that this doesn't really look like the IceCube neutrino spectrum, which is flat over quite a large energy range. But okay, we'll see. I mean, we haven't yet discussed how a whole population might look like. This is just a single Blazar neutrino spectrum. So in addition, just from a simple kinematics calculation, we can work out where the peak of the neutrinos spectrum should be. And that's because we understand rather well that all AGN that have an accretion disk, for example, they all have a bump in the UV energy range. So we know that all AGN have this very characteristic photon field with this very specific energy. And so therefore, we can always work out what should be the peak of the neutrino flux. So in the case that this happens in interactions of high energy protons with UV photons from the accretion disk, then we expect of order tens of keV. That's where the neutrino spectrum should peak. Now, if the interactions are happening with the infrared photons, which are down here at low energies, then we have neutrino production at higher energies at about 10 to the 18 electron volts. This is also true in GRBs we're gonna see in a moment. So we also know where the neutrinos should be in energy. So theory tells us already quite a lot about this neutrino spectrum. So now here I have the IceCube data. So you recognize maybe here, these are the muon data. So from all the tracks, and then the cascades are the black data points. And at high energies, at very high energies, IceCube has not detected any neutrinos, but that has allowed IceCube to place an upper limit to the total flux from all sources. So we have an upper limit, which is this black line here. And so now if we look at several Blazar models where someone has integrated what I was describing before over the entire population, here is one. It peaks at about 10 to the 18 electron volts. This model was made in 2014. Another one made in 2003 also peaks at about 10 to the 18 electron volts. And another one made in 2015, also same. So you can already maybe notice that none of these are a very good fit to IceCube neutrinos. And you are laughing, you are young and you don't have a prior. But when I say this in a conference with old people, they get very upset because everybody thought, or not everybody, but many people think blazars are fantastic, so we should see their neutrinos. But anyway, this is a problem, okay? So theoretically, we expect the blazar neutrino flux to peak at ultra high energies, and this is not what IceCube sees. Now, of course, if the maximum energy is low, what's gonna happen is we're gonna have a cutoff here. So, but still, we cannot do anything to push the entire model to the left. So we can get rid of the high energy flux by saying there are no high energy protons, but there's nothing we can do, almost nothing we can do theoretically to change that. In addition, so IceCube has done, and I'm going to talk about this throughout the lecture today, IceCube scientists do stacking analysis. This means they take all the known directions of all blazars, and they look at whether there is an excess of neutrinos in the directions of those blazars. And they do the same for GRBs and everything, and we'll go through this today. So here, this line shows the results of an analysis in which someone looked at all the directions of known gamma ray emitting blazars, about 1,000 of them in the catalog, and found no excess. So they were able to place a limit of the order of 20% to the total contribution of Blazars to the IceCube neutrino flux. And yesterday there was a new paper on the archive in which they took a different catalog and they took really 100 brightest Blazars, the most luminous Blazars, or rather I should say, no, they're really just the brightest at Earth. They peak at a slightly different energy. And that's actually, okay, I don't want to go into the details of that. I can talk to whoever is interested afterwards. But anyway, so they peak at lower gamma ray energies. This is somehow good for Blazars to be more luminous. And they found a very strong upper limit too. They found no signal. So there is now an upper limit of the order of 1% on Blazars as neutrino sources, which is really constraining and a really, a really important result, which many people will be really struggling to interpret, including perhaps me. So yeah.
Yeah, so on the previous slides, you have these model-dependent predictions, and you see they peak in high energy. And then when you're going to do your stacking, you see it follows like, so I see why they do it, but this puzzles me a bit that you have these models and then you're going to stack and you're going to show all the way the physics behind it. So I struggle how to interpret this upper limit, how it's presented here, when you know it should look different.
So this is, I think, a question for the experimentalists. So I agree with you that, so for in this paper specifically, they didn't try, like they only tried an e to the -2 or an e to the -2.4 or 2.7 power law. But I wonder what would the limit have been if they assumed an e to the -1 power law. That would have fit better. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it would be that different. Marcus, to you?
Well, so this is the IceCube limit. So typically we have the highest sensitivity at the highest sensitivity is typically at 10 to the power 14 electron volts. Mm. So if you have an e to the power -2 spectrum, it would probably then look like this here. So yeah, coming close to this limit here, e to the power -3 would look like this here. So you get like this U-type shaped. Yeah. But of course, you're right. If you have a good model for the emission, you would take the actual spectrum and fit it instead of having the power law. And for example, for gamma ray bursts, we actually simulate the spectra and put in the combined limits after we weight this with the model-specific emission. Of course, there are a lot of uncertainties, and I guess this is one of the main motivation why many analyses are based on these simple power laws with 2 parameters, so spectral index and the normalization.
Yeah. And I just remembered that in this paper yesterday, they also show the differential limit, and it has this U shape that Marcus described. There, of course, the limit is not as strong as 1%, but still, it's really constraining. So I don't know what it is, 10%, but yeah, it's very constraining, and that's the main message. And I want to wrap this up by saying, remember that we started this discussion by considering that the fact that all these different radiations, diffuse radiations, gamma rays, neutrinos, and cosmic rays, extra-galactic ones, have a similar energy budget. We thought, well, maybe this is a sign that they all come from the same source population. And we know that the gamma rays come from Blazars because we've seen they're the major class of gamma rays. And we know that this is not what happens with the neutrinos. So we have really broken a very important paradigm or possibility that many people liked, so that all the radiations do not come from the same source population. Okay, now this is not the end for Blazars, and maybe most of you have heard about this. In 2017, there was a neutrino alert of these high energy neutrinos. When this happens, everybody gets an email. I get an email. You can sign up and get an email. And importantly, those who have a telescope to point, they point their telescope to see if something is happening in the direction of that neutrino. And in this case, they didn't point because Fermi doesn't point. It just scans the sky. But what was quickly realized was that this is the gamma ray. Yeah, here are the axes. So 10 years. of gamma rays from this one blazar, and nothing was happening for 10 years. And then there was a 6-month flare, a really strong flare, and there was a neutrino right there. That's the neutrino I'm talking about. So the chance probability of such an observation is 0.3%. So this was a very important moment for our community, and the first 3 sigma excess or point source IceCube saw. And later people looked back at the archival, IceCube scientists looked back at the archival data in the direction of that source and found that in 2015, 2014, there was a 6-month period during which there was a neutrino flare. So 30 of order 13 neutrinos in excess of background, and that alone constitutes an independent 3.5 sigma event. So how can we interpret this? So I just told you that blazars are not producing the bulk of the IceCube neutrinos. Now I want to tell you that still during a flare, this is a flaring blazar, and during this flare, it was gray before it flared. And during this flare, it changed its flux by a factor of almost 100. So all of a sudden, even if this is not a very strong point source, it has a chance to really get bright during its flare. And since these photons may be the target for the neutrino production, we have good reason to think that maybe the neutrinos are flaring at the same time. So theoretically, this is very natural to expect. So this was a nice exercise that this community did. So as soon as the alert neutrino was made public, all theorists were working independent from each other and sort of in competition with each other. And they published their papers on the same day. And no, it's true. They published the day after the IceCube publication. And what was very interesting is that everybody had the same results. And what everybody found is that at most, this flare can have produced a 20th of a neutrino in 6 months. So this is okay because, you know, the Poisson probability to detect this neutrino, to detect one neutrino, if I have 0.05 expectation value is 5%. So if I have 20 such blazars, I expect to see 1. However, what I want to talk about now is what it takes for this source to produce this flux of neutrinos and what limits us to that number here. Why none of the groups working independently could get any more neutrinos out of this source. So here I want to remind you, so we're looking at photopion interactions of protons inside the source. And these are, in a sense, one of the reasons why we have an upper limit, because since we have these photons interacting with our protons to produce neutrinos, these photons are also a target for the gamma rays from the neutral pion decay. And these gamma rays interact quite a lot to produce electron-positron pairs. So the fact that this is a strong gamma ray emitting source puts a limit to how efficient neutrino production can be in the source, because what is good for the neutrinos, target photons, is bad for the gamma rays. The gamma rays would be internally attenuated in this source. And so we can actually calculate, so we know the ratio of the cross-section times inelasticity of the two processes. And we know that, so the neutrino had a 300 TeV energy. This corresponds to a proton with 6 PeV energy. And we know that the target photons that this proton preferentially interacts with are the same ones as the 15 GeV gamma rays. And the fact is we saw a lot of 15 GeV gamma rays. In other words, the neutrino production efficiency could not have been that high in this source. Now, if we want a lot of neutrinos, what else can we do if we cannot have very efficient neutrino production? Nobody? Okay, we can by brute force increase the proton luminosity. This is a sort of tunable parameter that we can just put it up as much as possible. So if we can't make it efficient, we just inject more protons or assume that more protons were injected in this system. And this is another place where we get this upper limit to the neutrino flux. So while the proton luminosity increases, we increase the neutrino production, but at the same time, we increase all the photons that are produced in proton interactions, right? So we have, oops, this way, we have electron-positron pairs from the Hitler interactions. We have neutral pions producing gamma rays. So at some point, we're going to produce too many photons. Okay, so we overshoot the X-ray data in this case, in this source. So this is what sets a strict upper limit to how many neutrinos this source could produce without violating all the constraints we have from X-rays and gamma rays. Okay. So all in all, my conclusion here, if this source produced this neutrino, it's a statistical fluctuation that we observe it. Another thing that I didn't say, but I can say now, is that the proton requirements are extremely high and cannot be representative of the entire Blazar population. So maybe this is a kind of rare event in Blazars, but it cannot be what happens in all Blazars, or we would have seen a lot more neutrinos from the whole population. Now the 2014 flare, remember these 13 neutrinos, is even more of a mystery. So several groups tried to model this one as well. And if they, again, by brute force, increase the proton luminosity enough so as to get 13 neutrinos, as is shown here, they violate the gamma rays and the X-rays. So far, there are things that one can invoke and say there are more photon fields and so on. And, but it's really very extreme parameters. Yes.
Big one. But how do we show that neutrinos and gamma produce in the same zone at the same place?
No. If we relax the requirement of having a single zone, well, first of all, wherever where neutrinos are produced, some gamma rays have to be produced. And then we can start to add parameters to our model and eventually increase neutrino production a little bit with respect to what I showed here. But the general picture is that we need proton content, which is extremely high and untypical of the Blazar population. So this doesn't change. Okay, this is what I wanted to say about Blazars. And now I want to briefly say, so you see that all these, here I call it AGN lobes and hotspots and so on. All these are regions in jetted AGN. The lobes are the outer part of these jets. And these are all places where we can comfortably have production of very high energy cosmic rays. But I want to briefly say another thing about AGN. Remember that on Monday, I said that only 10% of AGN had jets and only a small fraction of those jets are pointing towards us. So people already in the 90s said, well, why don't we consider the neutrino production in non-jetted AGN? So they don't have a jet. So it's not so clear where they produce the protons, but they are more numerous. So maybe their total contribution is important. So here the models are, I would say, not as standard, but the most sort of accepted scenario is that as we have infalling matter into the supermassive black hole in these jetted AGN, and there's pressure coming from all the radiation and particles close to the black hole, we end up with a shock surrounding the accretion disk. So people in the 90s already remarked that there must be neutrinos produced. So we have this standing shock. This is where we accelerate cosmic rays. And then we have all these photon fields related to the accretion disk. This is where neutrinos can also be produced. So in the cores of AGN. And when this happens, we have so many more non-jetted AGN than jetted AGN that we expect a strong neutrino signal. So that was the paper in 1991. And so recently there has been what I think is a very interesting result from IceCube. So they stacked the positions of all non-jetted AGN from some galaxies. And they found a 2-point sigma excess with respect to background expectations. And what I find really nice is that the spectral shape that they infer is this blue shape here. And it's almost e to the -2 power law. So also what you would expect from astrophysical shock acceleration, you see here, this is the model. So actually, this is really nicely on top of that model. So I find this compelling, but it's only 2.6 sigma. And maybe someone from IceCube here can tell us this will take a long time, I think, to grow. I'll be certainly looking out for what happens with this. I don't know, Marcus, can you tell us? Will it take many years?
So this is a recent analysis. So I guess you would have to double the data to get above 3 sigma. Yeah, and of course 2.6 sigma. I mean, it's a high chance. I mean, I don't want to down talk.
I understand.
It's interesting,
no,
but
yeah,
it's still the verdict is out.
We need to wait at least, as you said, double the time. So yeah. Okay, so then I will not talk much about starburst galaxies because Enrico will talk about them. I had prepared just a couple of slides. Just the main thing to remind you here is that we see these really crazy emission lines, which tell us that there is a lot of gas, a lot of star formation. There's also cold gas. This is what enables star formation, and this is great then for the production of neutrinos. The magnetic fields are strong. This means cosmic rays are trapped in these galaxies for a long time. And some of the nearby starbursts have been seen as gamma ray sources. One thing I want to remark here is that unlike photopion interactions, where we get this very peaked spectrum, in starburst galaxies, because they have all these thermal protons, the most likely channel for neutrino production is then proton-proton interactions. And so here the cross-section is flat, as you see. And so as a result, if we have a power law proton spectrum, then we expect a power law neutrino spectrum. And you know, this is not so different from what IceCube sees. So in that sense, this works. And so I just want to briefly say that starburst galaxies, but not just starburst galaxies, also UHECRs and also galaxy clusters have been proposed as good environments for having what is called the reservoir model, in which we have acceleration of very high energy cosmic rays. The highest energy cosmic rays have the largest Larmor radius and they escape their sources. The low energy ones are trapped in the magnetic field of the source and they stay there and they interact a lot and they produce neutrinos. So in that sense, we could have a situation in which a single population under the reservoir model produces both the ultra high energy cosmic rays and a very strong flux of neutrinos. And I think this is still consistent with more or less everything we know about the neutrinos. So this is not ruled out that this happens in some of these sources. And just briefly to say, the only problem with starburst galaxies is that if we want to explain all the neutrino data with starburst galaxies down to low energies, we have a problem, and this is that they would overshoot the diffuse gamma ray emission that they are allowed to contribute to the total diffuse gamma ray emission that we see after we've subtracted the blazars. So this is a problem for starburst models, but if one is happy to give up on these low energy data, so and say that they come from some other population, then the medium energy data or I don't know, this is not the correct term. The high energy data in IceCube are consistent with starburst galaxies. Okay, so now I will switch to gamma ray bursts. These are another one of these populations that everybody thinks must be doing some high energy cosmic ray production because they have these extremely collimated jets. So for those who are not so familiar, so these are very strong pulses of, or explosions, which last a very short time. They last from few seconds. Actually, we see a bimodal distribution. Some of them last half, or not half of them, but one population lasts less than a second, and the other, we call these short GRBs, and then the long ones last almost a minute. And during this time, they release energy up to 10 to the 15 ergs. So compare that to the brightest AGN, which is 10 to the 49 ergs per second. So for a brief time, they are the most powerful things in the sky, the most powerful gamma ray sources in the sky. So truly remarkable. And in addition to this prompt phase, which is less than a minute, they have fading emission, which goes on for months. And now there have been 3 of these gamma ray bursts that have also been seen as TV gamma ray sources. And so perhaps the most important result associated with these GRBs is that in 2017, when LIGO reported its first detection of a neutron star merger event, within 2 seconds, the Fermi, the instrument in Fermi, which looks for GRBs, found a GRB. And after an extensive campaign with optical telescopes pointing to look for the host galaxy, they found a host galaxy, which is about 40 megaparsecs from the Earth, in which we now think both the neutron star merger and the short GRB originate. So this was very important because for many years, people thought that short GRBs are the product of neutron star mergers, but nobody had any proof. So this was proof of a very well-accepted model, and a very important moment for multi-messenger astronomy. One thing I want to say here about GRBs is similar to what I was saying before about blazars. The fact that GRBs even exist tells us something about how relativistic they are. So we measure 10 GeV or higher photons from GRBs, but we also measure their size from the fact that they are from the timing. So we can figure out how much the shock can, or how much this matter from the explosion can travel in a certain amount of time. That gives us the size, and we measure a luminosity. This is our observation. So putting together these two, we can work out the number density of photons in that region where the GRB happens, and that is so high that the gamma rays should not be able to escape. And the only thing which we can change here when we calculate the optical depth, which is radius, so the size of the region times the number density of the photon targets times the cross section, is how we whether this is a very relativistic source or not. In that case, our inferred number density is larger than the density in the rest frame of that source. And so from that, you see here that the factor of gamma squared appears. And so if that gamma is really large, then we can reconcile our observations with the fact that the gamma ray, so we can sort of live with the fact that gamma rays escape. And this tells us that the Lorentz factor is of order 1,000 for so extremely relativistic, much more relativistic than any jetted AGN for at least a short time. And so as a result, there are many possibilities for acceleration of protons in this relativistic jet. And so again, as I was saying before, depending on which time and which place in the jet the neutrino production happens, we also have a different expected peak neutrino flux because initially the photons are high energy and later further out we get lower energy photons. So we expect as a result higher energy neutrinos. So here again, IceCube, this is a very important result from IceCube. IceCube has put very strong limits on GRBs as sources of high energy neutrinos, which was again a very surprising result. So with the stacking analysis that I explained before, IceCube is able to constrain anything more than 1% of the total neutrino flux coming from the prompt phase, so the first 1 minute of the GRBs. And the limit gets weaker as we increase the time window of the search. So it can be at most further 20% if we also consider a week or so of the afterglow. Okay, so another very popular source, very strongly constrained. Related to these are tidal disruption events. So these are events in which, so near the center of any galaxy, we have a huge amount of stars, and maybe you have seen around Sagittarius A star these beautiful orbits. And so it was predicted in the 70s that roughly once in every 10 to the 4 to 10 to the 9 years, one star will be in a situation where the tidal forces on it are larger than its own self-gravity. And so in that case, the star is stretched and we have something like this. So we have a stream of star matter and being pulled, and then half of the star sort of ends up orbiting the supermassive black hole in close orbit, and the rest in this sort of more open orbit. And this produces an incredible explosion. Now, this should happen in all galaxies, but if it happens in an AGN, remember this is a very variable galaxy, then we won't be able to detect it because there is intrinsic variability. So the best place to look for these is quiet galaxies where not much is happening. And so far, this is a relatively newly discovered class of explosions. Observationally, we have seen about 100 so far. And now 3 of these had jets. So what does this mean? So, okay, I showed here that what we end up with is this stellar matter ends up forming a kind of accretion disk around the black hole. And in some instances, we can have a jet in the polar direction, something like a small AGN jet, basically. And if we have that, then it's easy to imagine that there's particle acceleration in that jet. And so as a result, at least jetted tidal disruption events have also been proposed as very good sources of high energy neutrinos. And okay, have about 15 minutes, I think. Okay, but maybe I can go a bit faster. But specifically one event, so this in 2016, Swift saw one tidal disruption event, which is kind of the most beautiful tidal disruption event we have seen in Blazar mode. So we were looking into the jet. And so for that event, there were no neutrinos associated with it. But the modeling that was done, which constrained the magnetic field strength and the radius of the size of the region in the jet, sort of was allowed people to say that maybe even ultra high energy cosmic rays can be accelerated based on this simple Hillas argument that we've used throughout these lectures. Okay, now, what do we know about neutrinos from tidal disruption events? So the process is similar to what I was explaining before for Blazars, photopine interactions in the jet. But you remember this plot that we looked at and which Catherine also showed us, in which since we haven't detected any point sources, we can rule out extremely bright and rare source classes as producing the IceCube neutrinos. And because jetted tidal disruption events are very, very rare, they are constrained by this non-detection of point sources. So stacking limits also an independent search for neutrinos from jetted tidal disruption events has put them to about no more than 1% of the total neutrino flux. Now, only a small fraction of tidal disruption events have a jet. Those that don't have a jet are less constrained. They could make over their 30% of the total neutrino flux. But there is no clear theory where should this acceleration of high energy particles happen. Maybe we have something similar we saw in non-jetted AGN before, something surrounding the accretion disk, but the theory is less well developed. In any case, in 2019, there was one neutrino, this is shown here. So this associated with one non-jetted tidal disruption event. So what's shown here is this decay of this tidal disruption event over 200 days. You see there is a peak, and then within about 200 days, a neutrino was detected. And the chance probability of such an event is 0.5%. And then a year later, actually a few months later, there was a second event. Also, the neutrino came within 200 days of the beginning of the tidal disruption process. And then the people working on this looked at the archival IceCube data and found yet a third one. Now, this one is not confirmed as a tidal disruption event because it's in an AGN, but still the light curve looks like what you would expect. Also 200 days from or I don't remember, maybe about 200 days from the time of the explosion. So now we have three. It's starting to get more interesting. The combined significance of all these three observations is the order 3.7 sigma. So you see, if we get the fourth and the fifth one, we will have to start to develop the theory better. But what I can say is that if all these are physical associations and not associations by chance, then again, we require very extreme physical conditions in the sources, specifically super Eddington accretion, which is not something unheard of, but it just means some very extreme environments. So yeah, I would say stay tuned. If you see more of these, I would get excited. Final thing, neutron stars. So I've been going down in radius and up in magnetic field strength. So these are, of course, what happens to a collapsing star with a relatively large initial mass, larger than 8 times the mass of the sun. And in this process, so we had the star which originally had a radius of order 1,000 to 10 to the 4 kilometers, and it collapses down to 10 kilometers. And so during this process, we need to have conservation of angular momentum. And this explains why they have extremely short spin periods of order second. We also have conservation of magnetic flux. So we start with something with a magnetic field like the sun, and we end up with something with a magnetic field strength of order 10 to the 10 Gauss. And there are several places in a neutron star where one can imagine acceleration of protons and neutrino production, either associated to the neutron star itself or associated with the wind, which we call the Pulsar wind nebula, where we have astrophysical shocks. Now, Fermi has detected of order 200 galactic pulsars. It means pulsars produce at least high energy electrons. Here they are, these white squares in the figure. So they're all here in the galactic plane. And so if we were to ask ourselves whether pulsars are consistent with producing the entire IceCube flux, then what I thought of is we can compare to the IceCube neutrino arrival directions, and you see that there is no much excess of galactic sources. So we said there is an upper limit of the order of 15% of all neutrinos that could come from the galaxy. And I would say this is also the upper limit on galactic pulsars. If we invoke some special population of pulsars, which is rare in our own galaxy, then we could have more. But galactic pulsars are constrained. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost. Yeah.
But which part of Milky Way can IceCube see? Can be seen by IceCube?
Oh, good question. So you see here is the part that is nicely seen, and here's the northern hemisphere where eventually you have too much absorption in the Earth.
And where are all pulsars located? Okay.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the correct projection. Some people, but okay, they should be on both sides.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this brings me to more or less the end of what I wanted to discuss. So I thought that what we could do at last is put everything we've discussed into one plot and start by saying, so I've put here active galactic nuclei, jetted AGN, gamma ray emitting blazars, non-jetted AGN, galactic sources like the cosmic rays. Okay, these are, it doesn't matter, I didn't discuss these. These are microquasars, calorimetric environments, which are clusters of galaxies, starburst galaxies, ultraluminous infrared galaxies, tidal disruption events, GRBs, and supernovae, which I didn't discuss much, but they could also produce high energy neutrinos. So the first requirement is that they should be able to accelerate sufficiently high enough energy particles. And here, okay, I've put in green all the sources where they looked good in the Hillas diagram, and the rest I've put with a question mark. I would say this is a kind of yes, if it's a question mark. I mean, we are not doing any extreme theory here, so we're just doing order of magnitude calculations. Specifically supernovae, since I didn't discuss them there with the question mark. So now if we ask ourselves, do they satisfy the point source limit constraint? This idea that if they're very rare, they would have already produced some point sources. You see what's left. So actually what's interesting is what's left, which ticks both boxes. So here I would say non-jetted AGN are fine. Starburst galaxies are fine. Non-jetted tidal disruption events are fine. And okay, supernovae are also fine. And then if we further ask ourselves if there is a connection to the ultra high energy cosmic ray sources, this is where things get bad. I couldn't find any which really work, maybe starburst galaxies, but they are themselves sort of challenged to produce ultra high energy cosmic rays themselves, but maybe there are transient explosions inside the starburst galaxies which could do it. So you see that we're not left with many great candidates. I have here clusters of galaxies which are okay in all three. And now if I show you the upper limits from IceCube, from stacking searches on all of these objects, you will see that what's left is, so most of these sources can produce at most 20% of the IceCube flux. Starburst galaxies are not constrained by stacking limits. Supernovae, core collapse supernovae are not well constrained. And the jetted AGN, this is the result of this study that I showed, are also okay. But somehow none of them are the populations one might have guessed. So if I put them all together, they are not necessarily the most obvious candidates. this doesn't mean that all these other sources don't produce neutrinos, and I didn't have time to talk about it, but we have another energy range above the IceCube energy range where we expect a lot of new detectors, which might look for the neutrinos which connect better to the ultra high energy cosmic rays. I also want to say that there is the fact that these are not very rare, like starburst galaxies or core collapse supernovae in the whole universe, is why we can't constrain them. So we can better constrain sources which are rare because we can stack them more efficiently. And so, yeah, I mean, some of these you could turn, how shall I say? This is only a hand-waving way to classify all these, and I encourage you to go into the details of the theory to find your own answers to all this. And with this, I'd like to stop, and thank you very much for your
Thank you, Foteini, for today and also the lectures that you delivered on Monday. Are there questions? Yeah.
Hi. One thing we assume all the time is that the branching ratio is of the protons is around 1, right? Isn't that at all dependent on the medium where the proton decay, well, where the pion, well, which pion will be created?
Are you saying that we are assuming that the neutral to charged pion branching ratio is about 1?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. I am not aware of any reason why this could be severely modified in photopion interactions. I don't know, Mauricio is not here. Marcus, do you?
I don't know either, but that was just something.
Maybe there's some.
I think so. Exponentially, I mean, these are of course like ultra high energy cosmic rays, but if you calculate the center of mass energies, this is just lab energy. So this is actually fairly well covered in lab experiments. So we know the pion multiplicity there fairly well. So it depends a bit on PP and P gamma interaction, but it's always roughly at the same order of magnitude.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who was first.
Okay, thanks. Just to get this right about the gamma ray bursts, so they come in 2 families. One is very short, one is a little bit longer. And do we think now that all the short ones come from neutron star mergers?
Yes.
Okay, because we saw in this neutron star merger where we got the gravitational waves from, then there we saw that one was really short, and this would explain that there's this gap between the short ones and the longer ones. Is this the reason why we can be sure?
So it was theoretically predicted long ago that that the long ones come from the death of a single massive star, and the short ones come from this neutron star merger. And we had small indirect evidence in this direction. For example, short GRBs happened only in environments where we expected, like only in galaxies where we expected there to be lots of neutron star binaries, and long ones happened preferentially in places where we expected them to be enriched in massive stars. So this was just the final thing we needed to confirm the origin of the short GRBs. Yeah.
Okay, great.
My question is a little more general. So what are the expectations or your expectations for the field in the next 10 years? So you have shown us a lot of these studies. There are a lot of sources for neutrinos, and there are some constraints, and how the field will evolve for these next 10 years. What are the expectations?
Yeah, thank you. This is such a great and general, like, big question. I think progress is going to be slow because we are only detecting neutrinos at this rate until we have IceCube Gen 2, which will be a size 10 times, or not exactly 10 times, maybe 5 times, 6 times larger. We have seen that it's easier to constrain a source class than to confirm it. So I expect the stacking limits to become, just to continue to increase in significance. And as Marcus told us, if we expect this excess to grow for a particular population, we need at least to double the observation time. Now, what's happening is we have optical surveys, which will be much more sensitive than today's ones. So we're going to have a lot of optical transients, for example, associated with each neutrino. So the theorists will have a lot more work to model all of them and say which one. So we will have more false positive associations. And so we'll have a lot of modeling work to do to say which one of these sources is plausible and which one isn't. So we'll have a lot of papers on the archive and a lot of activity. Yeah, that's my expectation.
Okay, thank you.
So my question is about the magnetic field in neutron stars. You said it's 10 to the 10 Gauss. So I think that if you have a neutron star merger, I think this magnetic field increases by a lot, right?
Decreases?
It decreases in a neutron star merger.
Well, so one doesn't really know what happens when you have a neutron star merger and what is the final object. I don't know if this is what your question is.
Yeah, no, it's because I read that in neutron stars, it's expected that the magnetic field reaches like 10 to the 16 Gauss.
Okay, I think, so that's a general, all neutron stars, it doesn't matter if they are merging or not, they sort of spin down in time and their magnetic field also sort of is dissipated in time. So they start off very magnetized, okay, and that drops off with time.
Okay.
So as you said, to increase the neutrino production, we can increase the number of injected proton. So then what about the Eddington limit in that case? So
yes, thanks for this question. So I am not aware of any model in which we can have super Eddington accretion in supermassive black holes. There are a lot of problems that then happen to the galaxy, like too much feedback and you stop the star formation and so on. The models that I showed for Texas 0506 require super Eddington proton luminosity. So this is a problem. How did that happen in this source? And maybe it can happen for a short time, but if it were to happen for a long time, we have all kinds of problems with then, even with galaxy evolution. So this is, nobody knows if this happens or not in AGN.
You also had Starburst galaxies on your summary slide there. There's also some correlation of ultra high energy cosmic rays with Starburst galaxies, which would add like a one.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, actually, I think Starburst galaxies so far tick everything. So yeah, what Marcus refers to is that if we look at the arrival directions of all the ultra high energy cosmic rays, they are deflected, so they're not as perfect as neutrinos. But then we have a 4 point something sigma excess of cosmic rays from Starburst galaxies than we would expect from background. So this is interesting. Yeah.
One last question.
Since you are talking about the IceCube Gen 2, so how is it going to enlighten in future about our learning on the combination of different cosmic messengers? So,
can you repeat the second part of your question?
Like how are you going to, like what do you foresee in future about our learning on the combination of different cosmic messengers?
Yeah, okay. This is, of course, a difficult question. I think the main thing is, so IceCube Gen 2 will have a better chance to see the brightest point sources of neutrinos. Okay? And hopefully we have telescopes, because the sensitivity of all the telescopes like optical and radio and gamma rays are better than currently IceCube. So just having IceCube Gen 2 gives us a better chance to see point sources. Now think also at the same time, everything else, so like LIGO is having better sensitivity. So all the telescopes are improving at the same time. So in that time scale, in 10, 15 years, we have better chances to see sources of all the messengers.
And will they be more frequently observed?
So IceCube is going to be more than 5 times larger. That means we will have 5 times more high energy neutrinos. So more frequently we will have alerts.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should break now
Yeah.
for lunch. So let's thank Foteini for all the lectures. We will